Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we offer a brief lesson from a section of today's reading from the One-Year Bible, and we examine some questions that extend our learning from the Sermon on Sunday. Today I'm joined by Rivenbark and Alyssa Bream, and we're looking at a passage from Luke chapter 19, verses 1 through 10. So verse 7 says this, "But the people were displeased. He has gone to the guests of a notorious sinner," they grumbled. So this is Zacchaeus or Zacchaeus or Zacchaeus or whatever his name is. And it says, "Meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said, 'I will give half my wealth to the poor, Lord, and if I have cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much.' Jesus responded, 'Salvation has come to this home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham, for the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost.'" So when I read this story about the little short guy, I'm struck by the differences between him and the wealthy religious leader that we talked about yesterday. So we definitely seem to be in a theme this week. What can this story teach us about sharing the gospel?
Well, as we've been looking at these stories all week, in this one here, these two folks that are focused on, there are some similarities and there are some differences. Both of them are rulers. They're people of influence. Both of them have a lot of resources. They got a lot of money. The religious leader was known for keeping the commandments, although Zacchaeus was known as a sinner. And then you get into this division of the responses of the two individuals. The religious leader was instructed, he was told, asked to go sell everything he had and give it to the poor. Zacchaeus, on the other hand, he did so willingly. He volunteered. I think that gives a lot of insight to the hearts of the two individuals here. And when Jesus encountered the religious leader, people asked the question, then who can be saved? And he answered that. And then when Zacchaeus came to know Jesus, people came to the realization that anybody can be saved. And that's the good news of the gospel. Anybody can. And so Jesus, for one of the individuals, pointed out it's hard for rich people who depend on what they have. It could be rich in money, rich in education, in a lot of things. If you're depending on those things, it's impossible to come to him. But somebody like Zacchaeus, who was known as a notorious sinner, I mean, he was lowest of the low in that culture, that they can come to Jesus and have that relationship and be made right with him.
Yesterday, when we were talking about the importance of God working in people's hearts as we share the gospel, I think it's interesting to see here that the only thing Zacchaeus does is climb the tree, and Jesus sees that and invites him to dinner. There was no discussion of the law. There was no inquiry about the motives of even climbing the tree. All that Zacchaeus needed to know was that Jesus was willing to come to his house, and God had clearly been working on his heart before he even saw Jesus. And one simple invitation was all it took. And in that simplicity, I think it speaks to us today. People need to know that regardless of who you are, what you have done, Jesus is willing to be associated with you. He wants to be his disciple.
Yeah, and one of the things I noticed about this story, so at the beginning of it, Zacchaeus is seeking Jesus, but it became clear that Jesus was also seeking Zacchaeus. And as we share the gospel with other people, we have to remember that Jesus is seeking after them as much as anything. And we can trust his power is going to work through us. It's going to help engage people because he's seeking them more than they're seeking him in reality. And so have you ever seen someone who came to Jesus and thought to yourself, I can't believe that person got saved? Do you think somebody might have said that about you?
Probably many times. Said that. Can't believe he got saved. For me, it's people like maybe certain celebrities, for instance. And then they...
Are we going to talk about Russell Brand again?
No, I'm going to mention no names. You just know about some of their stories of their life because they're a public figure, and then all of a sudden you hear they've had this dramatic conversion. They've come to Jesus. And for me, honestly, oftentimes I'm going like, okay, well, let's just sit back and wait and see. Because it seems to be a pattern so many times, though, with high-profile people. They live this life, they have this conversion, and then a little bit later down the road, you're like, where's the discipleship part of it? It seems like there's the return to it. But there are a few people that I have known in my lifetime that because of the genuine conversion, when they met Jesus, you look at them and you go, this thing's real. It changes lives because you knew them before and you know them now.
Now I can't think about some of the celebrities that you probably don't even know their names.
I guarantee you I don't know some of their names.
One of the trending Christian songs on TikTok is written by somebody who would fall into that category. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Okay.
I'm not on TikTok anymore.
So
unless somebody shares something with me.
Well, I mean, it's one of those songs that, I don't know, like, it's a Christian song and it's catchy. And I actually went up to Dylan and I was like, hey, have you heard this song? And because it was stuck in my head, and he goes, oh yeah, Bella plays it all the time. And I go, do you know that Kanye West wrote it? And he goes, what?
And didn't he get saved and unsaved? And
that's what that was one of the persons I was thinking, but just because based on what you see and hear.
Right. And then he's doing horrible things in the spotlight that are exploiting people and all of that. And so, like, but you never know what the Spirit. You never know what the Spirit is doing behind the scenes, and you know that he was coming from such a place of craziness that hopefully God is still working on him.
Yeah. So for whatever reason, the one that popped in my head, you would know this person, I think, and you would have no way to know this person. I was pastoring my first church. The church was growing, and there was a family that owned all of the land behind the church. Older man of the family had died, and the mother at the time when I was moved there was living, and her son, who was, if I had to guess at the time, probably close to 50, may have been in his 50s, lived with her, and he had been married and divorced probably a few times. I think he was probably a customer of your agency more than one time, if I had to guess. You know what I'm talking about now? For whatever reason, he struck a liking to me, and he did not have the power to sell that land. Only his mom could sell it, and then the heirs after him. They didn't trust him as far as they could throw him, because they knew if they had given it all to him, he would have just thrown it all away. And anyway, the church, we were landlocked, and we struck up a friendship, and he talked his mother into selling us 5 acres of land behind that church for nothing, basically nothing. It was certainly worth more to us than it was to them, because they weren't doing anything with it. He was probably trapping or something on back there, but so we bought it, but not sometime in the last year I was there, right? He started coming to church. Said he'd never been to church much in his life. He started coming to church. He had I think a woman he married. I'm not 100% sure now that was coming with him. But he was rough around the edges, just most everybody that would have talked. I've never heard anybody say a lot of good things about him. That's what I would say. And one Sunday, I gave an invitation, and he got up out of his seat. He came forward. The first thing he did, I don't know if it was because it was the church we were in, he reached in his pocket and pulled a pack of cigarettes out and laid them on the altar. Knelt down, prayed, asked me to pray with him so he could know Jesus. And everybody in the room was stunned. You could see the look on their face, like, I can't believe he's down here praying, I don't have any say over whether it took or didn't take,
Right.
That's not even my responsibility. But when I think about, I can't believe that person, that was in the room, right? You could feel it in the room. Everyone's like, what? I can't believe this.
This brief illustration, which is true illustration. It wasn't an invitation to dinner. I was in a place to eat breakfast by myself, the only person in the building, until this person walks through the door. They go order, and of all the empty room, they come and sit. I mean, as close to you and I beside each other.
Don't you hate that?
I did hate it. And I had all my stuff spread out, and I was reading, taking notes, doing this stuff. I'm like, can you not see this and figure it out? And I was like, I didn't even want to look over it. I'm just confessing here. I hope this will help us all. And he didn't just sit there. He started talking. And I'm like, okay. And long story short, it didn't take very long at all to realize that God had brought him to that place, put him there because he needed to hear about Jesus. Mm-hmm. And he had some strongholds and some issues in his life that obviously were controlling him and devastating his life, that I was able to share with him and pray with him and point him hopefully in the right direction to get some help with some issues and things. And after the fact, and after he was gone, then I was convicted because I wasn't sensitive. I wasn't looking for an opportunity to evangelize, to share good news. I initially looked at it as an interruption on my time. I'm here with the Holy God, trying to prepare to bless other people, when in fact, he needed to hear about Jesus. Yeah. So he invited himself in.
The thing that I think about is within the larger context of Tyler and I and one of our friends, who is also named Steve, starting an art gallery in Cleveland, which was a mission. The purpose was to be evangelistic, to be a force for good. I think we call ourselves a gallery for good. Within that, there was one person who was kind of within the friend group, and there was a lot of simple things that we did throughout that. Like one of the things that I remember doing was watching her dog, but the trick was the dog was completely deaf. The dog knew sign language, and she had intentionally got a deaf dog because she was a sign language interpreter. And so we had to learn how to take care of this dog for her. And it's not easy, but it's also not that hard to have somebody's dog when it was best friends with our little dog. And so as we were getting ready to leave Cleveland, she came from a really tough situation, and she came and she sat down with us at coffee and told us how much that meant to her. It has to be compounded sometimes, that those simple things, that you can't discount the good of, building those relationships, but you only build relationships, even those difficult ones, by doing simple things.
The most unusual thing, and it made me ask myself a lot of questions. Earlier this week, you talked about a Christian altar call. In the last 12 months, somebody invited me to lunch. Said, "Can we go to lunch, have a conversation?" I said, "Sure." Regular church attender, been in church all of their life. And we were eating, and I said, "What you got on your mind?" And they said, "I want to be saved, and I'm ready." And I was like,
huh?
I was like, "Oh yeah?" And then they started crying and telling me their story. And, obviously we prayed together.
Just a couple of things that story points out is we should never assume people are in relationship. Well, we should be sensitive to ministering to them. And as we talked about the entire week, we shouldn't let stereotypes keep us from connecting with people, building relationships, and sharing Jesus.
Hopefully this has lowered the bar a little bit for feeling like if you haven't done quote unquote evangelism, that you don't need to make it difficult. There isn't you have to know this much theology to be able to evangelize, that God is going to use you in the situations you're in.
Okay. Yep, that's right. Well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back with us on Monday as we continue a conversation around our daily Bible reading from the 1 Year Bible.